Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. Ukraine says it has launched a 40-day campaign to force Russia to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, intelligence warnings suggest the Kremlin may be preparing provocations against NATO's eastern flank. As the battlefield shifts beyond Ukraine, concerns are growing over Vladimir Putin's next move and Belarus's role in the conflict. To lay this all out for us, we're joined by Reuben F. Johnson. He's a research fellow at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Reuben, welcome back to TVP World, and thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. So 40 days President Zelensky has given Putin to come to the negotiating table, and Ukraine certainly seems, certainly from the outside, to have turned the tables on Russia. Is that your reading?
Yes, it is my reading, and I would ask everyone to think back just 30 days. What were we hearing? What were people saying? What they were thinking? Oh, well, they were saying it was Ukraine appears to be making some progress, but it's very tenuous. It's very fragile. It could go either way. There's been a sea change in the last 30 days, and a huge turnaround, I would say, since in the last 3 months, literally. So this pressure campaign, this is the real deal. They are not simply going to continue what they've been doing and then dress it up with a very fancy title associated with it. There's going to be an intensification of these attacks, particularly on Crimea and particularly on Moscow.
Right. I want to come to Crimea in just a second, but overall, do you see this as a strategic change or simply an operational one on the battlefield thus far?
Well, it's a strategic campaign because it's designed to raise the costs of the war so high and to create so much instability, and there's plenty of it already, that there will be enough people telling Putin that he just needs to get out of this thing because and there are plenty of indications that there are people telling him that, either directly or indirectly, that he needs to find a way to shut this down because it's doing so much damage, and it could very well reach a point where the system starts to collapse upon itself.
Right. I want to come to Putin's reaction also in a second, but before that, Crimea, state of emergency, long queues, wanting to cross back into mainland Russia, or cross into mainland Russia. Is there a chance that Ukraine could actually win Crimea back, do you think?
I absolutely think that that's possible, and they will follow the program that was dictated by General Douglas MacArthur in the Second World War in the island hopping campaign. If you remember, he said, starvation is my ally. And that's the Ukrainian approach. They're going to make sure that nothing gets through. There's no electricity. There's not going to be enough water. There's not going to be enough food. There's not going to be enough fuel. The military installations will continue to get pounded, and they're going to make it untenable. They don't have to invade Crimea. They just have to make the Russians give up because it's not worth staying there.
Right. Now the thing is, we've seen time and again from Putin that he is stubborn, and he always does tend to find some, how should I put it, underhand or alternative response to the one that is often expected. What can we expect from him? Because there are concerns that he's going to step up hybrid attacks on NATO's eastern flank to test NATO. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the hybrid attacks have been going on. They will continue. What I think is going to change is that a lot of these sabotage operations that we've been seeing here in Poland and elsewhere, in the past, the Russians have been recruiting people online with some kind of a false advertisement. It looks like an odd job, and it turns out, yes, we want you to go burn something down or blow something up, and it's just been random people. They're now going for more professional operators, professional criminals, people that can create more damage, to cause more damage. That's one thing. The second thing is the foreign minister, Sikorsky, foreign minister, was absolutely correct when he said there's a very real danger that Putin would try to create a pretext or try to create a false flag operation where there's an explosion in Russia, and he says, "Aha, that was a drone that came not from Ukraine but from one of the NATO countries," and therefore, when he responds by attacking a NATO country, he'll be able to say, "I'm not attacking NATO. I'm responding to their attack first, and I'm defending myself."
Right. Well, of course, that's one of his many tools when behaving aggressively, violently against others. How well prepared is NATO for such an event?
Well, provided that it's not a sustained, a full-fledged attack by the Russians, NATO is probably prepared. I mean, you have to remember, Putin's a bully, so he's inclined to go after one of the smaller, perhaps one of the Baltic nations. It's a scenario we've always spoken about. Would he launch an attack against those countries and try and scare NATO into perhaps giving something up, or perhaps pressuring Ukraine to give away territory because they're not prepared for a full-fledged conflict? There's any number of scenarios, but at this point, NATO countries they're spending more on defense. They realize this war is not going away. They realize what the Russians are, and they realize the Russians are weak, and they are not without the ability to respond. We are already seeing NATO countries, which in the past had not been enforcing them, but they're now going after these shadow fleet tankers and taking other measures that are really harmful to Russia's interests. And they could accelerate that or increase that type of activity in a heartbeat.
Right. Well, as you say, it is somewhat surprising to many that NATO and the EU hasn't taken a stricter approach to the shadow fleet. But it could, of course, also be a response by Putin to distract people from what's happening in Crimea and within Russia. Do you think that's an option?
Well, he might be able to distract people in other parts of Russia from what's happening in Crimea, but the people living in Crimea are not going to be distracted. I mean, I've been watching postings of people on different sites and reading things about people just saying, "Oh, we came here in 2014 after it was occupied by Russia," and these people are picking up and leaving for good. And you mentioned in your opening remarks there was the queue of a 5-hour queue, 3,000 vehicles on that Crimean bridge of people rushing to get out in a panic. These people are panicking because they know when Zelensky says, "Okay, this is going to be 40 days of this." I mean, one of the Ukrainian officials literally said, "Hell is coming to Crimea," and they believe it. Right. Nothing Putin can say will dissuade them from saying, "We're leaving, sorry."
Right. What do you think are the chances of Putin actually resorting to a tactical nuke?
Well, I've said this before. This may be conventional wisdom, but it may also very well be right. But if he does that, okay, there are negative after effects from that, meaning that his great supporter and ally, the People's Republic of China, would say, "Okay, we're out." And I've just watched a long interview with Admiral Rob Bauer, a former admiral in the Royal Netherlands Navy who was head of NATO's military committee, who said any decision that Putin takes like this will have to be agreed to in Beijing. And the Chinese are not going to agree to this. So this means he loses what little support. He loses the most important support he's got because China is underwriting this war. China is sending, they say, "Oh, we're not sending any weapons." Well, no, they're not sending any weapons. They're just sending all the pieces to Russia so that the Russians can assemble them on their own. So without that, he's in deep trouble. But what does it do if you use a nuclear weapon on Ukraine? Well, the prevailing winds blow from west to east, so you're going to have radioactive rain and wind coming down on your own soldiers. And what's the damage? I mean, as Ben Hodges said several years ago when this was first raised, he said, you can't kill 32,000 people with a tactical nuclear weapon unless they're all sitting in the same football stadium, and no one's playing football in Ukraine these days.
Right.
So it's like everything else he talks about, his big, bad, wonderful Sarmat and his big, bad, wonderful Orestic missiles. It's a big bluff.
Okay, Reuben, just in the last minute or so that we have left, very quickly, Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko. Belarus has dismantled its guidance systems for Russian drones at Ukraine's insistence, and then Lukashenko and Putin had a meeting on the sidelines, well, in Russia, just recently in the last day or two. What's going on with that relationship?
Well, I think, first of all, this has been a brilliant move by Zelensky to make this ultimatum that says you either dismantle these towers or we're going to send our drones and blow them up, which would be an attack on Belarus. And Lukashenko cannot afford that. He cannot afford to look that weak. But what's happening is there are fortifications and other preparations being made on the Belarusian side of the border that look like the elements you would need to put in place to stage another incursion into Ukraine from Belarus, like there was at the very beginning of the war. But the problem they've got is that the estimates are, for you to have any kind of a chance of doing anything to come across the border into Ukraine and it having any impact, you would need around 70,000 or more personnel. I don't think Russia has that many people to spare. They might be able to assemble that many people if they could convince Lukashenko to send his entire army across the border. But he's not going to do that because his own people have been telling him for years, if you send your army into Ukraine, you're saying goodbye to it. They're not going to come back because they're demoralized.
Right.
They'll just join the Ukrainians.
Right. Unfortunately, Reuben, we're going to have to end it there. But as always, thank you so much for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good evening.
Thanks again.
Thanks. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.